Alrighty, welcome to another new deck in Shadowverse, courtesy of the new Omen of the Ten mini expansion. I'm going to narrate a little bit to clarify any of the choices or thoughts I have as we watch, and I hope you enjoy. This is our new Tempo Forest Craft deck, taking some ideas from a few other forest decks that have been around here in the past and smashing them into one almost toolboxy deck. Selwyn here is actually a really good flex pick. I'm running him instead of Justice as a potential 2-drop removal if you need it. Late game he becomes a body and removal or even an AoE if you combo him up. But you know, if you've got an early game setup where you just need him as a removal, he's an easy 2-drop removal. You should never feel bad about using him like that.
Usurp, pillage, and plunder. I'm gonna rest for a bit.
Against Sword, we don't expect to completely take the board early, but being able to put up some kind of fight early is important, just to make sure that we're keeping them honest. If we give up the board entirely against Sword, they're just going to run us over.
I'll take until I stop.
Make way for Vane! Strike! I'll cut a way through!
Nature. She suffers so much
There's
more.
more where that came from!
Now, it's against a good Sword deck, it's honestly a very fine line. It's like balancing on a razor's edge on how much you want to focus on board control and how much you dare go face. Just keeping them off board is useful as long as you're not burning too many resources at it. But generally speaking, if you can get a good clear and keep bodies on board, it's worth it. Just to keep them from throwing up on the board and making things harder down the line.
Hey, let's play. Hey, let's
If you evo to go face too heavily against Sword, they're just going to find some swing turn, and once they take the board back, you'll never, or almost never, get it back. Especially since we're not running something like Cassiopeia to try and punish plays like that.
So I'm lost.
Time for me to prove myself. What's the matter? Petrified already?
So now up against Blood. This one is actually questionable. Depends on what kind of blood they are. There are a few different archetypes running around for it. And even against just Dark Feast Bat blood, we actually have a decent chance. A little bit better than before the expansion, but especially after the nerfs. Now if we end up taking a lot of early damage from blood, we've got 4 healing cards in our deck, and unfortunately 2 in our hand at the moment, which is really early for them. But that really helps later. If they do put a lot down on us, we can heal back up to a reasonable life total so that we're not just throwing the game away in the early game. You know, just getting above the potential lethal is really useful versus a lot of decks, but especially Blood.
Don't hurt me.
Let me weave you a lie.
So, whichever version of Blood this is, this guy is pretty stalled having to hardcast Flaros. It'll be useful to keep him alive, but the lack of tempo is going to hurt him. He might retake the board later, especially if we see Evil Eye, but we're going to gamble a little bit and see if he does, if he is able to punish us for this. Even if he does, we have some measure of recovery available to us. I know Evil Eye, which is actually really good.
An azure fittingly.
How's this for a transformation?
Dyed in azure, are
They're picking on me. Hey, let's play.
Their sacrifice won't be in vain.
Quit it! Quit it!
You know, since we didn't see Evil Eye last turn, we're pretty safe. Just keeping the 1/1 bodies, preserving our Evo, and put it on a big ward so that he has to Evo to get rid of the ward before he can deal with the rest of the board. That's actually an impressive tempo swing, though it's probably not enough, considering we're now holding on to 2 Gilneas. Even still, it'll keep him alive for a little bit longer, so
Is my
we'll just keep it relatively safe and see how we end up.
Oh, come on! Don't hurt me!
So even though he's managed to stabilize a little bit, we've gotten his last Evo.
It won't be long now.
We still have one of our own, and this is mostly just to ensure that we don't run afoul of some kind of person shenanigans, and
Oh, you're the
that'll
worst.
end it.
Time for me to prove myself. Mother, father, come on. Wanna know how you're gonna die? Let's work together, okay?
So no 2-drops hurts a lot for Shadow.
Hey, let's play. Hey, let's
I'm
play.
gonna wonder, is this handful of 3s, is this handful of 5s? I mean, you can't tell just from looking at one set of plays, but
Not like this.
usually a
For you.
missing 2-drop really hurts Shadow 2 or 3 turns down the line, so
Hey,
I'm actually really happy with that. Sadly, it doesn't say anything about how our deck performs, save that we're able to punish it pretty hard. But anytime you see a Shadow player miss a 2-drop,
why are you
it's
letting
almost
me
always a good idea to press that advantage while you can.
There. Now you feel like killing me? Ow! Do you hear the voices of the wind?
You know, just trading just enough to keep his board
You're done
fair,
for.
putting gas back into our hand, which in this case is going to be an easy, very
Finally did it.
very safe return next turn if we need it. But this is already looking pretty nasty on our side.
Nature. She suffers so much more. Feel the flames of the underworld.
So in this case, I am going to sack the 2 Wisps just because I want to have a bigger body on the field behind them. The chance of him having, you know, an easy wipe is relatively small, but the two ones are not going to be as valuable
There.
as the 4/5 body. The 4/5 body is going to eat, you know, a Cerberus or something else on the Evo. It's a small trade, but valuing that high health on his last Evo is I think the right play there.
This song's for you. I'm leaving. Time for me to prove myself.
All right,
Time to shine.
so no spoilers, but this is actually a very long game, and I left it in the reel here because I wanted to speak about one thing that happened in the course of this game that really stuck out to me afterwards. This is going to end up being a Mysteria deck, though it looks a little awkward in some places. I mean, it's pretty obvious early from some of his plays you'll see. But it's really critical to understand how important certain things are in your deck. And, you know, whenever you're making a choice of a card, then this is the real pickle when playing something like Forest is, you know, something that you do now can affect everything that your deck is going to do 2, 3, 5, 7 turns from now. And this is one of the, you know, criticisms that some people have about Forest as a class, and that it's so difficult to play the deck, the class properly, because a single mistake in a hotly contested match could mean anything.
Ready for the good stuff?
And, you know, with a deck with so many different combos and so many different interactions, you can't possibly hit every combo on every card. So choosing where and how to spend the resources you have and on what is really important.
Hey, let's play. You're done for. I'm so sparkly. Oh no.
So already I'm a little uncomfortable because it looks like I'm going to end up behind on Evos. I'm not sure if we can come back out of it, but I also don't want to give up too much board too early here, especially if he's going to flood out.
Do you hear the voices of the wind?
Now, the flip side is we're getting lots of gas for us to use, and we've got the Sky Whore in our hand. So we realistically should be planning at some point in this game setting up the 7 card turn for Sky Devouring Whore anytime against Rune and probably against Haven. It's a good idea to just have that always in the back of your mind. If I'm up against either of those classes, barring you being up against something like Holy Lion, the long game, you want to have that Sky Whore set up. And using necessary resources to do anything but set up that Sky Whore can cost you, because a lot of games are going to come down to you going on first or them going on first. And right here I'm using my wisps in a way that's useful and relevant, but I pretty much just telegraphed that I am not or will not be upgrading my Sky Whore this game. And that's very, very dangerous. Especially being that he's at full life. I've got no chip damage in. Now this is going to be a very grindy game.
Got me feeling hungry.
And now it's actually unfavored to me because I've given up that activation of Sky Whore, and he's running a class that can cheat on Evos. I can't do that, and I'm out of Evos now, so I'm relying on a little bit of luck to get me out of this. I can still keep it up for a while, but this is going to be tough. And now we're just trading salvos of Gilneas, which is actually kind of funny.
I'm sorry, Tia. What's that for? Come on! You're gonna pay for this. Don't hurt me. Hey, let's play.
Their sacrifice won't be in vain.
Did you
And this is where I began to notice in the game that I really, really missed having that activation on the Sky Whore. It took this long for me to realize I should have saved it, which is rough. And that the extra Gilneas just is kind of like the nail in the coffin. Like, I'm not going to chip this away. I need that Sky Whore, and it might be too late for me.
Hey, let's play. Hey, let's play. Come dance with me.
I'll tear through your spirit and heart.
I'll devour your innocence.
So there's a blessed refill. Even though it's his Gilneas, it's one of those odder things about this deck that, turns 8, 9, if you've got a Gilneas out, you can blow your entire hand and Gilneas will bail you out on turn 10. I cannot stress how useful that is in this deck. With all the combos, you tend to run out of cards late, and that's just, she's amazing for that.
I'll devour your innocence.
Take your seats, boys and girls. I'll teach you real quick.
Oh, Mysterio. This takes me
Take
back.
your seats, boys and girls. I'll rescue everyone. May the forest be at peace.
And just as a side note, I apologize for any bad pronunciation I have here on Gilneas. I actually have to look that up sometime to see how that's supposed to be said. A little self-conscious saying it, in my second only ever video, recording audio, but,
So much I overlooked.
whatever. Hopefully I'm not being judged on my enunciation.
Hey, do something about these winters. This is just the job for me. So sorry.
Did
Did I save you?
And here we are just trading board back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and whoever ends up
May the forest
sticking longest wins.
Hey, Colette's way! Hey, Colette's way! Hey, Colette's way!
I'll tear through your spirit and heart.
So sorry.
Anyone call for super
Oh, and the Evo cheat.
You ready
Just
for the
one
test?
last dagger in the back.
Now to trample all over you.
Well enough. I'll hold my blade at Mysteria.
I'm gonna rest
Oh,
for a
come
bit.
on!
And I'm just looking at my hand right now at that Sky Horror thinking, why didn't I upgrade that Sky Horror? I mean, looking at everything, I'm thinking to myself, maybe I could deck him out. But I've got this sneaking feeling that there's got to be an Ann somewhere in his deck. If he pulls an Ann on me, it's just going to be game over.
I'll burn it all to ash. Together, Freya, we're unstoppable.
And there she is. And there we are, realistically, if I had upgraded that Sky Horror and played just a little differently, that would be game. So, one mistake made
Maybe I
what,
overrated
8 turns ago
Hey, hi there.
mattered. So, I didn't spoil it. This one's a big loss, but if nothing else, it showed just how close force games can be and how one tiny little mistake can change an entire game. It's a really good game too. It was fun to play. And everyone's favorite hater deck now, Lions. So, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you've played against Lions at least once. They were a meta deck for a while. Looks like they're coming back again.
Queen one day.
One of the biggest things with Lion decks that you need to remember always is, no matter how much you hate that deck, there are just certain draws they can get. If they get early Amulet on you,
The voices of the
it's a good chance you're just going to lose. And I hate to say that about any deck, but if you overtune your deck to try and beat that kind of draw from Lion, you're just going to hurt yourself. So, I don't have anything in the deck currently to deal with Lion aside from just playing our A game. No, there's some stuff, some tech that might come back because of Lions becoming predominant, especially that Amulet. But, you know, if you see them drop the double Amulet on you, play as best as you can. Don't get tilted. Just understand that, you know, if they high roll, they high roll. That's just the way it goes.
You're trespassing in the crystals.
And right now it's just one Amulet, so we're still in this.
Let the gems light your way.
So the feel seems a little odd, but maybe they're worried about us chipping them down constantly or something. But it is a good ward. I mean, it's not a bad card.
Repent harder! Harder, I say!
Not like this.
You'll never get near the princess.
Hey, Colette's way. Hey, Colette's way. It won't be long now.
I'll dice you and freeze the pieces.
Now this is a little odd, but I'm using an Evo here to kind of force his hand. Now he's already out of Evos. I've got one that I can retain. I was not expecting him to have just straight up board wipe right there. But the good thing about this deck is you can actually do that. Just replace your board time and time again. Now that's also draw specific. You know, I've had games where I don't get card generation, I don't get card draw, and my hand just goes flat. But once you get things rolling with here, you know, if you have to do stuff like that, don't be afraid to go wide. Yes, there are things that can punish you, but until the meta settles down, this is a wide deck. And this is a deck that can go wide, refill its hand, go wide, refill its hand, go wide. That's part of how this deck functions. Don't be afraid of it.
Someday, the true peace.
Digestif.
That hurts! That hurts!
So he finally hits a 4/4 lion. He's getting close to his end game, but we've managed to stick a board long enough that we're probably just going to finish it.
Guess I'm not gonna reach the moon. Time for me to prove myself.
This one's for my family.
Dragon again. It comes down to which version of dragon they're running. At the moment, this list is actually somewhat vulnerable to PDK. Mostly because we don't have really good ways of getting PDK itself off the board. So if PDK ends up becoming prevalent, we might have to make at least a 3-card or a 1-card set adjustment of something just so that we have answers to PDK. But there are so many different versions of Dragon running around, I wouldn't throw that in just yet unless PDK becomes the dominant archetype, or some variant of PDK.
Lord Poseidon! Ow! I'll show you disdain. Someday I'll...
Embrace the sea.
Be gone.
Behold the glory of his spear! Do you hear the
And
voice?
just as a spoiler alert, this ends up not being PDK. This is something that I had heard about in discussion but had not seen yet. It was very interesting to see what the hullabaloo was about.
Did you like it?
Though I had initially thought of him as some kind of odd Lindworm variant. But this is
It won't be long now.
almost a good stuff deck. This is one of those, like, I was thinking about PDK over the course of this game, like, okay, he's got all this other random stuff. You know, what else is he gonna throw at me?
I am the god tree, the root of life.
And the flip side is we're not seeing a whole lot of ramp right now, which is actually useful. Forest is not incapable of dealing with a ramping dragon, but it can make things more difficult if they're able to hit some of their really big stuff before you can get your plan at least in motion. The flip side is you are actually like an inverse of dragon. You know, they're ramping up to play their big things. You're playing lots of small things to make your big things cheaper, or at least getting more out of the little mana that you spend. So there's always that neat co-duality between these two classes that makes their fights interesting.
May the forest be at peace. Hey, let's play! Sacred life. Don't hurt me! You're trespassing in Crystal's home.
So here we are, as I was saying last game, filling our board to refill our hand and do it again next turn if we have to.
Not like this.
And there's the combo. There's the big one. I was not expecting this until it hit me.
I'm gonna rest for a bit.
That's pretty cool.
They're picking on me!
Time to say goodbye.
This world is made of impotence.
You'll never get near the princess!
Surprise, surprise, you hit me with your big combo, but check this out, I got cool things too. Haha, look at that. I bet you weren't expecting to see Fairy Saber.
There is no meaning in power. Magnificent.
Oh, come on!
There we are, we baited out his wards, he had to clear our board, which leaves us open for the big man.
There's no one else I'd rather lose to.
'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. Hey, let's play!
'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at peace. 'Cause I'm the god tree. The root of life. The forest is at pe
Well, thank you for joining me for my second Shadowverse video with commentary. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again soon.